I'm here.
Hi,
You all right?
how are you? Have you had a good day?
Yes. Can you hear me okay? 'Cause I'm on my
I can.
Wi-Fi. Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, all good. All good.
Perfect. Perfect. So I was just telling the audience that you are co-admin of the MHDG Facebook
Yes.
group,
Yes.
and that we're going to be talking this evening about endometriosis and its links to menopause, early menopause.
Yeah, how it can be. Yeah, and in a lot of
Yeah.
our situations of early menopause, we have. Do you know what? I'm literally just logging off for work. How about this? I finished at 6, but I just dropped off. I was like, I've got to go, guys. Dropped off a meeting. I'm literally turning my computer off, so that you have my full attention. That's really bad, isn't it? But I'm just doing that there. There we go, done. And nothing else is going to go bing, bing, bing in the background.
You are juggling, as we all do.
Yes, we do. Well, yeah,
Juggling.
it's funny navigating work life, menopause life, getting a divorce. It's all fun.
It's a common thread that's running through a lot of people's lives, all of those things you just mentioned.
Yeah.
I thought it might be a good idea to explain what endometriosis is to the audience. So do you mind if I just, correct me if I'm wrong, I'll just give it a bash.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, if you're not suffering with that, you may not really understand what it is. And you may have some symptoms and don't know you have it. So I think that might be a good place to start. So during our menstrual cycle, the womb of our lining in our womb gets thicker to prepare for the fertilization of the egg. And if that egg isn't fertilized, that's when we menstruate and those cells are shredded while we bleed. So endometriosis is when similar cells to that of the lining of the womb grow in other places that they shouldn't. And I understand that that can cause a great deal of pain in, for instance, your bowel, your bladder.
Yes.
And of course, they act in the same way that the lining of your womb acts. And so they bleed each month. But unfortunately, those cells don't have an exit point. So they're stuck in your system, they're bleeding, and it can cause a lot of pain and discomfort. You end up with scar tissue and inflammation and, lots of other symptoms.
Yeah. So I'd written down some statistics so that you could have them and some of the symptoms that I had, just in case anybody else is resonating with this.
Perfect.
So you are correct in your definition, which is amazing because not many people do define it correctly, and they're like, oh, it's it, and I'm like, no. But yeah, so some women with endometriosis can have pain every day of the month, not just on their cycle, and that's due to the inflammation and the lesions, as you've said, and also it creates adhesions. So only 20% of the general public have heard of the word endometriosis. So that's not a lot of people if we think about the entire general public. It's not rare. It is the second most common gynecological condition in the UK, and it's one of the most painful. So the NHS and also other institutes have said it's one of the most painful diseases. It's incurable, so there is no cure. And some women don't even know they've got it. Depending on their symptoms and how severe it can get, they might not even know that they've got endometriosis. They might have it quite mild, but it'd be causing them a lot of pain, or they might have it quite severe, but it's quite not as painful. It depends where those lesions sit, whether they sit near nerves, what damage they're doing, all those sorts of things. So not one size fits all, and all endometriosis women do struggle with similar symptoms, yet they can vary as well. So 80% of women have to miss work due to endometriosis pain. So if they are having a monthly cycle, then that can be every month they have to take time off due to that severe amount of pain and potentially heavy bleeding as well. There are 176 million women worldwide that are affected by endometriosis.
Wow.
So massive number of women.
Yeah.
And on average, diagnosis still takes 7.5 years. Mine took 9.5 from when I started saying, look, something's not right, to getting a diagnosis. And some symptoms of endo that I can share with you. I've written them down because I'd also written menopause ones down so that we can educate on that. But symptoms of endometriosis, so pelvic pain, it can be like burning, stabbing, like someone is wringing out a towel inside of you, but like with your organs, because we have to remind everyone it's not just limited to the pelvic cavity. So these lesions could be found anywhere in the body. It's been found on the heart, lungs, diaphragm, liver, in the armpit, and also on the brain. So not just in that. Yeah.
That I didn't know. That I didn't know. I thought it was limited to the lower body.
No. It can spread. So when if it's on lungs, if it's found on lungs, women can have thoracic endometriosis. So when they're in a flare, their lungs can collapse and they can end up in ICU. It can also affect the valves on the heart and stop the heart from pumping properly, and obviously cause cardiac problems. Yeah, there's so many things that it affects. So it can also, pain when going to the toilet, that can be passing urine or bowel movements, and that can be because there might be, so I had endometriosis lesions in the pouch of Douglas, which is the passage between the front and the back, and it's like a no man's land area, but because obviously bowel movements were passing behind that area, it was all pushing and causing an incredible amount of pain. So there can be pain going to the toilet, and also if endometriosis is found on the bladder, it can cause like symptoms of UTIs when going to the toilet, and burning and stinging. So it can cause constipation, but then at the same time it can cause diarrhea. So one day you could be completely constipated, and the next day you might go to the toilet 6 times and not know why. And so therefore you're then thinking, what is wrong with me? Because it's neither one nor the other. Thick blood clots, when you are bleeding, it can be thick clots that come out that can be horrific, actually. Painful sex, so painful intercourse, and you're like, what is that? It's really painful, so then you don't want to have sex. Pain after sex, so that can be really impacted as well. And pain's supposed to be sex is supposed to be enjoyable, isn't it? And pain-free. So so that's a massive, but people, women, anybody doesn't really want to talk about that, do they? So they're not going to bring that up with girlfriends. They're probably not going to bring it up doctor because it could be embarrassing for them, not realizing that it is a symptom. UTIs and reoccurrent UTIs, painful smears as well. So smears can be really painful. Fatigue and tiredness, because your body is running 24/7, so it's trying to repair this damage that's being created that you might not know is being created, and it's just running all the time.
It's exhausting.
Nausea. So I really struggled with that, which I guess can be a hormone imbalance as well, and women get it with morning sickness and also during menopause. But nausea, and then passing out, so sometimes I would just completely black out. And I wrote these down today, and I was writing and thinking, oh my gosh, this was my life. Thankfully it's a bit of a different story, like 2 years on from my last surgery. But yeah, the symptoms were horrific, and I had my first laparoscopy in 2006, and not blaming that consultant, but obviously that's many years ago, and they probably were not as well trained as what some consultants are nowadays in spotting the different types of endometriosis. And I got told, no endometriosis, everything is good. And it took until the 1st of December 2015 to get a diagnosis, a proper diagnosis. And I'd been in and out of hospital multiple times, been seen by different people, because the symptoms, and you can interrupt me at any point, the symptoms can vary so much that they're then looking at Crohn's and colitis, they're looking at irritable bowel disease, they're like, oh, some women do have heavy periods, some women do have lighter periods, some women do have pain during periods, that's just normal. And you're like, what is normal? Like, is it normal to be passing out? Is it normal to feel like my insides are being wrung out like a towel? Is that normal? And you kind of, this is the problem with it, when you do get diagnosed, you get diagnosed and told it's incurable, but you have relief that you've got a diagnosis and that you hadn't the plot in all the years trying to get diagnosed. So the reason I talk about endometriosis endometriosis and my journey and like to spread awareness is because there can be other women out there experiencing this and not know.
Absolutely.
And so sharing the story can help,
yeah,
and raise awareness can help, because that's what we need to do.
Absolutely.
So I'll let you kind of ask me questions, and
no,
I can say
thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's so informative. And as you said, there isn't a cure, but there are various treatments that your doctor may try with you. And as I understand, they can come in the form of hormone treatments, either testosterone or progesterones, or, you know, I guess there's a little bit of experimentation in a way.
Yeah, so what we found, there's a lot of research that is going on behind the scenes, thankfully now. My friend, you might not have spoken to her, but she'd be happy to do a live at some point, Carla Cressy. She's the CEO and founder of the Endometriosis Foundation, which is a charity that is very close to my heart. I do try and volunteer when I've got time, and also I use my voice to raise awareness for that charity. So Carla set up the charity while she was going through her journey as well. And some of the main aims and goals of the charity are to help women with an earlier diagnosis. So we know that getting diagnosed sooner is so much better, because we get told to go on the pill. You get told to try all these different things. I got told, have a baby, and I was like, sorry, what? Because obviously having a baby and getting pregnant, for 9 months your periods are gone and your estrogen has subsided, so therefore you wouldn't have those lesions bleeding, but obviously the damage is already there. And this is the thing, diagnosis is key, because until someone, hopefully a BSGE accredited consultant, because they are the gold standard care of endometriosis consultants, and there's only so many centres in the UK, but getting that diagnosis from them and then having a treatment plan. So typical would be laparoscopy, confirmed diagnosis.
Sorry, Ali, that's where they put the camera in to have a little look around and investigate. It's like a keyhole.
It's a keyhole surgery, but I never like to downplay keyhole.
No.
Don't cut them with feathers.
Yeah.
Knives are involved, and tubes. Typically, you'd have 3 cuts, 1 on each side and 1 through your belly button, and that's for lighting, a scope, and then obviously the camera that goes in. But whilst they're in there, they would try to treat and remove. Now, excision surgery is cutting the lesions out from the root, so it's not necessarily burning. Some surgeons burn, and
they can use a laser, can't they?
Yes, so they can cut it out from the root, and then they would remove that. Typically a BSGE consultant would excise it and then remove it, and do the best possible job to avoid any future damage. Obviously, any surgery, there is a risk. And I thankfully had, I also was having cervical cancer scares at the same time. So that's why my endo took a little bit longer diagnosis, because I'd had 2 treatments on my cervix as well. However, you know,
actually, just interjecting, sorry, that can be a side effect. Is that the right phrase, that it can cause?
No,
they come in hand in hand.
Not really, but the symptoms that you can get can come hand in hand. So when I was 20, and that's a massive part of my life, but I always forget to tell that bit because I think it's trauma, and sometimes our brain tries to block out that trauma. But yeah, when I was 20, just before I turned 20, I kept saying, look, I've got bleeding in between my periods, I've got bleeding after sex, I've got pain, all of this. Said that my discharge is sometimes funny, I don't know what's going on. I got told, there's no history of cervical cancer in your family or ovarian cancer. You are on the pill. There is no way this could be linked to cervical cancer. And when I turned 20, I booked for my smear, because back when I turned, I'm 39 now, but back when I turned 20, they were doing smears at 20. And they increased, that was when they increased the age to 25. And I got told, well, you can't have one because the age limit's been increased. And I was like, well, hang on a minute, I was already booked. And they were like, well, it's just been changed, so we can't do it. So I continued to go and ask for help, and nobody would do an internal examination until I saw a locum doctor. I still have the letters that say there is no way I could have cervical cancer or anything could be wrong with my cervix. And obviously, again, this leads to the trauma, because with the endo not being diagnosed.
Yes.
So I was having those symptoms alongside endometriosis symptoms, and then I saw a locum doctor, and they did an internal examination of my cervix, and typically they would have a look, do a smear, sometimes paint with iodine to check what the cells look like and that they are visible. But they painted me with iodine, and she just said, look, we need to get you referred to the women's place at the hospital and get that looked at. So obviously the endo stuff kind of got put to the back of my mind. I went for the treatment. I had loop excision when I was 21. So this was 2006. This was March 2006. And that's when I requested a laparoscopy to see if anything was further up, because I said, look, I'm still struggling with these other symptoms. If anything else is wrong and I haven't questioned it, I'll never forgive myself if there could have been something. You've been telling me that I couldn't have anything wrong with my cervix, and yet there was. So I would never forgive myself if there's anything else. Anyway, my cervical cells were the stage just before cancer. So they caught it in time. But had I not insisted something was wrong, I wouldn't have been able to see my 22nd birthday, let's put it that way. And then 5 years later, along with the endo symptoms, I'd been having smears every 6 months and then once a year. And then I got to 26, so 5 years later, and they'd done a smear at the Christmas and said it was all okay. And then I'd gone, because I'd had the Marina coil fitted to help with obviously endometriosis, which the progesterone coil releases progesterone into your womb to stop you having a period, and that can be in situ for 5 years, so then you wouldn't bleed for 5 years. And that's also something that can be used as HRT when you get there. So I've seen that question, but if we ask questions, we'll go through questions at the end, won't we? Sorry, I get easily distracted.
That's okay.
So I'd gone to have this coil checked because I'd had it in and it didn't feel right. I could still feel it, and I'm well aware of what's going on in my body. This is probably one of the problems with me. I know when something's not right, and I was like, something doesn't seem right. Anyway, I went to have an internal scan to check, and an external to check that it was all okay. And when they went in with the internal one, they could see on the opposite side to where I'd had my former treatment of the cervix, another load of patches of cells. And she said, look, we need to refer you. And I said, regardless, I want the coil removing. I'm not happy with it. I can feel it. It just doesn't feel right. It was like my body was rejecting it. Because it was a foreign object. I'd not had children. It was plastic in my womb. And for some women, it's amazing. But obviously for me, it was just not going to...
It's not for everybody.
Not for everybody. So I went to have that removed. And I went to have another test at the hospital for biopsies, but when I got there I said, can you remove the coil at the same time? I got told, it's a different department. I said, look, you're down there, surely you can whip it out. Anyway, they removed the coil, and then they looked at the cervix and they said, we can do biopsies, but we know what it's going to come back with. Can we do laser ablation of the whole cervix? And I agreed there again. So at the time, my partner at the time thought he'd be in the waiting room 15 minutes. Obviously, 45 minutes later, I'd had a whole load of treatment on my cervix and wasn't able to walk and had to take some time off work. So all of this was running alongside the endometriosis. So then the coil was removed. I then had really, really heavy periods, to the point I was on methylenic acid, I think, to stop with heavy periods, to help with flooding and things like that. I then got told to go on the pill, then come off the pill, let my body flush everything out, all out of my system and all. And now, what I know now, I wish I'd known then.
Yes.
But I didn't. And somebody asked, which I will answer this one, someone asked you asked as well, is there a relation between endometriosis and cervix? Cervical cancer cells are typically a change in the cells, which could be down to age, the HPV virus, which anybody can contract if they're sexually active. It's like catching a cold. It's not a nasty STI or anything like that. It's just if you've been sexually active. And sometimes those cells can change back. So if they are minor, they can change back, because our cells change all the time. But obviously if they're at a different stage, that would likely then lead to cervical cancer. So they are completely different to endometriosis lesions, and don't react in the same way from what I'm aware. But obviously if they're on this side of the cervix and haven't penetrated through the cervix wall, that's your best
Yeah.
option. But like I say, every woman, get to know your body, know what's normal for you. I used to like monitor my discharge throughout my cycle, and I used to worry, and I got told, well, if you don't have a discharge, you won't be able to walk. And now I'm in menopause, I'm like, oh, now I know what this is like. So so yeah, I just say monitor those things. So thankfully, I did have annual smears for 10 years, and when it flagged up an abnormality, I had them every 6 months. So I was very closely monitored. And then when I had my total hysterectomy 2 years ago, my cervix was removed. So that was a huge relief for me to not have to be... During the year, I was fine, but when it was coming up to smear time, I was like, oh, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
And then obviously with the endometriosis debacle, I'll call it, because I think I'm one of the lucky ones. Although people will be like, oh my God, you're so strong, you've been through so much. I've got friends who I've met through the endometriosis community that have had like 13 surgeries, that have
because
like...
it can come back. It's not a one solution, is it? It can just grow back.
And unfortunately, if we do not see a BSGE accredited consultant, and I must say that, if we do not see one of those as the first person that we see, which we might not, but now we want that to be out there to be given. Yeah. That's who you want to see. Yeah. If we don't see that person, then they might do a surgery, and it might not be full excision. It might be where they're cutting it out, or they're burning it away with laser rather than cutting it out, and that's therefore they're not getting the root. So then those lesions can regrow. So with excision, it's a better surgery, but still no cure. But it is a much better surgery to have it all cut out if possible.
Yeah, because those cells feed on estrogens, don't they?
They do.
So
if
you're still producing estrogen, it can be an ongoing cycle.
But not only that, we get plant estrogens, we get estrogen in makeup, we get estrogen in everything. Yeah. So then you have to not monitor everything, but you do have to change your lifestyle. So avoid inflammatory foods, avoid certain things. I know some endometriosis women that can't have milk, that can't have soy. Yeah. I mean, I don't have soya anyway because soya's got estrogen in it. Some say it really works for them. For me, I was like, it causes me too much pain. When I did have endos, well, when it was live, what I'll say is, because I've still got it, but I'm just not experiencing any symptoms from it for the last couple of years. So I still avoid soy, but people have to change their diets. They have to look at meats, whether they want to eat red meat, organic meat, all these different things, and we have to overhaul it. And it's not just surgery. It could be alternative therapies, acupuncture, hypnotherapy, Reiki, exercise, meditation, trying to not get stressed, because I know if I am under a considerable amount of stress, my nerve damage, because I've got nerve damage down my left side from my surgeries, and well, where it was all stuck together, and that flares up when I'm in a bad situation, really, or in a situation of stress. So I wasn't diagnosed, and this is what I was saying. Carla set up the foundation so that we can raise awareness. So we're hoping more GPs are aware of BSGE consultants. It's now on the curriculum at schools for periods and menopause. So we're hoping that endometriosis gets talked about. I'm on the PPG at my practice, which is the patient participation group, and anybody can ask their GP practice if they've got a group, and can they join if they want to make changes within their GP practice and community, because that is the best place to be able to support other people. So we're trying to do that with the Endometriosis Foundation, so that, and my doctors are amazing, I must add. They have been fantastic over the years. The reason why I went undiagnosed for such a long time is because I'd been at a different doctor's practice. Right. And I changed, and the doctors at this practice have been amazing when they've linked all my symptoms together. And obviously I inform them, and I'm like, if a woman comes in and she's got all this, please do not think it's IBS and give her Buscopan or send her off. Obviously those things have to be ruled out, but if it's all the other symptoms and it's around the cycle and we can put it to that, then the best thing to do is to refer to a BSG accredited consultant. And I keep saying that there is a website, so it's the BSG website, and you can find your local endometriosis centre. which
I was
has
going to ask you about that. We will add the link at the end to the stories for everyone who's watching. We'll put this on our feed. Obviously, links don't work on feeds, but we will put it on stories, and we'll add all the relevant links there, so you can just go ahead and start doing your own research and looking into things.
And anybody can DM me. I do have a private account, but anybody can request to follow me, because I'm all about helping other women and how get the care. But the BSG accredited centres have an accredited care, so there will be a consultant, there will be a nurse that is part of that team, there is likely to be a urologist, there is likely to be a bowel specialist, there is likely to be, if obviously it's found anywhere else in the body, the person that deals with the lungs, the person that deals with the heart, all of these people. So it's a whole team. So when they found where it is, that team then comes in and it's like guided by a top consultant that has done this accredited training. So not all gynecologists are created equal. And that's, we think,
we know.
Gynecology, I'll find a gynecologist.
That's a hard lesson to learn.
It is, because the first guy I saw, he delivered me. He dealt with my mum. I must say, my mum's got endometriosis as well. My sisters don't have, that we know of. My eldest sister might have, but it doesn't cause her any pain, but it could have caused fertility problems.